What is up, guys? Welcome to the Chamber. We're a brand new upcoming YouTube channel dedicated to getting you better both on and off the table. Today we're going to be looking at Set 1 Broly. He recently got some new love and support in the form of a rebooted field card and Demonic Restraint. And he's now a premier deck that you're going to be seeing running around a lot. So today we're going to give you a profile on just one way this deck can be built, along with a couple tips on how to play it and how to play against it. Since the leader's old, we're going to start off with the leader himself. So, on both sides, he has a permanent where he cannot attack battle cards. That means he can only swing at leaders and unisons. On his front side, when he attacks, both players have to discard a card. There's a lot of ways to minimize that and make it a benefit, but baseline, both players are pitching. He awakens at 4 lives or less and draws 2. He has the same permanent on his back, and when awakened, his auto on swing upgrades to allow you to draw a card make both players pitch a card, and then both players place a card on their field in the drop area. Now, normally this is a really one-sided effect, but with the rebooted Broly's reign, this ability ends up becoming just when this card attacks, draw a card, and your opponent discards a card and places 1 card from their field in the drop area. Really powerful effect on leader swing. It's one of the main reasons to play it is the upgraded field card, which, to start us off, we're going to look at his new field card, Demonic Restraint. This card is cracked. It comes out for free whenever it gets discarded, and there's a million ways to search it, so it's effectively always in play from the beginning of the game, and it makes the leader's ability completely one-sided. In addition, it lets you play a 6-drop Green Broly from your hand for 3 energy, and we do run 1 target for that. But mainly its purpose here is to make it so your leader only affects your opponent the entire game, turning a reciprocal effect into a very one-sided and very punishing ability. It's kind of like the Set 7 Raditz leader on steroids. Next, we have the Searcher for Demonic Restraint in our 4 copies of SS3 Berserker. This card, when it gets discarded, it goes out and finds a Broly's Ring, but Demonic Restraint counts as Broly's Ring in all areas, so it can find Restraint, and then plays it. It also doubles as a Self-Awakener. Some builds will allow you to use his secondary ability where you can pay 4 energy and crack a ring or restraint and play him, and then play a 7-drop. But this build has a few black cards, so we don't use that. Instead, we just settle just for the search ability for the restraint. To make the deck as consistent as possible, we run 3 copies of Broly Dawn of the Rampage. Dawn of the Rampage is a 1-drop searcher for top 7 for any Broly card. If we open and mulligan and don't find a Broly or a Demonic Restraint, we can look for this 1-drop instead and then search the top 7 for, say, a Berserker, discard Berserker, and find a Restraint. It's almost impossible to brick and not be able to find a Restraint because of this. Next, they're a little pricey, but get them if you can. 4 copies of Paragus the Sacrifice. This lets us effectively loop Demonic Restraint. We can kill it with his ability and it'll come right back, and it draws us a card every time we do that. And optionally, we can take a life when we do it as well. So Paragus is not only card draw, but also a strong source of self-awakening if we really need to. Now, as you've already noticed, we run a healthy amount of 1-drops, and that's because the unison for the deck for us is Bardock. Bardock slams your opponent's combos, just has an auto, much like Tragedy Foretold. And he's also a decent beater that pings away our opponent's hand, which is the entire theme of this deck. He also has a very good -3 where he becomes a win condition on his own, as a 20k triple attacker is a good way to close out a game. It's the only unison we run, and you're really looking to try to get as much as possible, and it's one of your main mulligans. Now, to complement that, we of course run 4 copies of Dorian Potential Unleashed. It stops a turn. It's 0 energy with the unison out. Kills some random chaff on the board. There's not a whole lot to say here. It's a great card. To go along with our free plays when we have a unison on board, we also run 4 copies of Frieza, Charismatic Villain. Villain is 0 energy, destroys a 7 cost or less whenever anything gets played. Really good, really efficient card. Also not a whole lot to say about it on its own. It's just an extra level of protection. Some versions of this deck will run Demigre, Unison, or Sorcery, and you can threaten both this and Dorian Potential as early as turn 1, So it's a thing you should keep in mind when you're playing against the deck. Now for the next big money card. 3 copies of Zamasu Deity's Wrath. This card's not super necessary, but it's a 1-drop that you can use and remove a Frieza with. And he's just a 20k that when he attacks, your opponent discards a card. And with the indestructible keyword, there's almost nothing you can do to get rid of him unless you're playing against red and they have a large amount of minuses. Otherwise, he's just an invincible 20k that's going to continue to swing every single turn. To continue with our 1-drops, along with our hand control, our super combo for the deck is Vegeta the Lone Prince. You can play him for an energy and make your opponent discard a card, and then kill him with Bardock to make your opponent discard a second card, or combo him away. He's just a very flexible tool that does a lot of things in the deck. Whether you need extra hand control or he's just an acceptable super combo since we put ourselves at 4 life almost immediately. Let's talk defense. We run 3 copies of Android 17 Impending Crisis. Crisis is a 1-drop negate that comes out. He's comboable as well since he's a battle card, but he's nice because you can sacrifice him to our Bardock Unison to discard a card after he stops an attack. He's not really recurable in any way and we don't get his auto, but that's not what he's here for. Finally, we run 2 copies of 2 Shocking Death Ball for our last negates. This card, you can get to 5 cards in your drop area pretty easily to activate its Sparking Text. It's kind of like DPU that it destroys a 2-drop, but this card actually stops the attack instead. It's just a nice layer of defense against bigger swings if you're tapped out. And it is recurable thanks to the next card coming up. Our 2 copies of Master Roshi, Kamehameha Origins. This guy lets you just buy back any random extra card in the deck. Our DPUs, Shocking Death Balls, things like that, anything we need to get a hold of. You can pay energy and get it back right from the drop area. As a tech option, we run only 1 copy of Cell's Earth Destroying Kamehameha. Some decks will run more copies of this, but the energy in this deck is really tight, especially in the early game. And this is recurable if we really need more copies. So the most I would ever play this is probably at 2, at least in the main board, because it's very cloggy in the early game since your first couple turns are completely stuck. Now, as I mentioned, we are not exclusively a mono green deck. We run a small selection of black cards first. 3 copies of Son Goku, Power of Legend. This guy comes out whenever we make our opponent discard a card, which is literally every turn. He's a 15k critical for 0 energy. He doesn't have combo power, which hurts, but it's still a free 15k swing. And he can warp himself to warp a battle card with 4 energy or less. So he's effectively a 2-for-1 since your opponent's going to have to combo out the critical or lose the life either way. And then you can warp a key target afterwards, so it's a nice 2-for-1 for no energy. In addition, we run 2 copies of Secret Identity Masked Saiyan. When your leader swings, his ability to KO battle cards, place battle cards in the drop area, is your opponent's choice, not yours. So the trick to this deck is leaving your opponent with only the card that you want them to put in the drop area with your leader ability and clearing everything else. Sims is a great way to do that since it just clears 6 energy of cards out of the board. And a single 25k swing isn't bad either. On to the actual game closers. We run 3 copies of Broly, the Rampaging Horror. He's a 6-drop that we pay for 3 energy off of Demonic Restraint. When he comes down, we rip 2 cards out of our opponent's hand, our choice. The pulls are blind, but we pick which cards, so it's really efficient. And then he's a 30k double strike, so he's good at just like ending the game rapidly, or clearing unisons. You can play him earlier, like on turn 3 at the earliest, but usually he comes down on 4 or 5 as a game ender. And then finally, the SCR for the deck. We run 1 copy of Gradient Masked Saiyan, Primal Rampage. Theoretically, you can pay a 5 energy for this guy and have him be a 40k triple strike dual attack, which is nice. It's a good way to end games. But most of the time, you use it just to destroy an opponent's battle card in combat, since it ignores barrier and it's very hard for your opponent to react to, especially like in the middle of the late game. You can cheese and sneak away a lot of lethal attacks by just killing the attacker and making them lose all the cards in their combo area. That's it for the actual deck. Let's talk a little bit about what you can do to win your matchups against this leader if you see it. Broly is a old leader, so he draws 2 on Awaken as opposed to untapping 2 or even being hybrid. And that's one of the main weaknesses of the deck, is that early game your energy is excruciatingly tight. So they usually don't have a lot of options to play strong defense. So very early in the game, they're vulnerable. Like turn 2, turn 3, they're pretty much forced to tap out to do most of their things unless they want to play like kind of suboptimally. So the best thing for you to do is like on turn 2 or turn 3 is find a way to turn up the gas and start pressuring them, since this leader also lowers himself down to 4 life. The other thing for you to do is, whenever possible, try to avoid comboing or losing discards that you don't have to. The Bardock Unison can rip. This guy can rip cards out of your combo area all the time, so if you're feeding like this auto, you're just shrinking your own hand size. It's usually better to just not combo at all unless absolutely necessary and just deal with the numbers on the board. Because the longer you can keep a healthy hand size against this deck, the better. If you burn your own hand out too quickly, you're just going to get ran down by the constant discard, since these 2 cards alone, just on their own for 0 energy, are ripping 2. And often with other card abilities, you're looking at losing 3 to 4 cards a turn in total. So you need to do things to avoid burning yourself out until you can kill them. And then finally, this is a control deck, specifically hand control, but it's a control deck no less. So just get under them and kill them. If you can end the game or put a lot of pressure on them early, that's always the line you should take. The most you probably should try to burn at the Unison, unless you can kill it, is just keep it off of 4 markers. The leader doesn't have a ton of comboable cards in the deck. You have a lot of like extras and 10Ks. So keeping pressure on your opponent can quickly result in killing themselves, since they also tend to drop themselves to 4 life immediately. That wraps us up for our deck profile for OG Set 1 Broly, along with a couple of tips for how to play the deck and how to play against it. If you enjoyed this, be sure to give us a like and a follow. We're going to be coming out with a lot more deck profiles, gameplay footage, commentary, the whole 9. Until then, we can't wait for you to enter the chamber again. See you later, guys.